Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Real Women, Real Purpose Talk Show, live in the On Purpose Woman magazine and global community Facebook page. I'm Ginny Robertson, one of the hosts of the Real Women, Real Purpose Talk Show, and I'm also the founder and publisher of On Purpose Woman magazine and founder of the On Purpose Woman global community. My guests today are three women who, like me, have been on the planet for 70 or more years, and we're going to talk about aging. And I put the aging in quotes because aging is a really ripe topic. And so knowing these women, I think we're going to give you some things to think about when you consider your aging process and how you feel about it. So welcome Rosemary Bredeson, Kitty Hatcher, and Belinda Todd. Thank you for being with me today. So Rosemary, I'm going to start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I don't have to mention my age because you've already revealed that. I am
70 plus. How many pluses are there?
Well, yeah, plenty, right? And I am the scientific mystic. And what's fun is when I think about these decades that we've been in, I've changed careers pretty drastically in the middle, from working on Hubble Space Telescope to becoming a spiritual mentor and teacher of the new consciousness. And so I do work with clients to help them. I like to say I like help women discover their exhale, because they've been so caught up that they haven't figured out their purpose and they haven't figured out who they really are, and that it's okay to be your authentic self. And when we get to that point, there's an exhale and a peace about that. And I'm on the planet to help raise consciousness.
Thank you. Thank you. Bless you. Yes. How about you, Kitty? Tell us about yourself.
Well, my name is Kitty Hatcher. I've been an astrologer for over 45 years. I'm 80 years old. I love to teach classes in astrology and tarot and meditation, and I lecture in different places around the U.S. I guess in the 70s is when I started being an astrologer. Before that, I was a music teacher, and I taught music to kindergarten through 8th grade. And I taught piano, Jenny. You could have been my student. And I also taught people that started piano at 45, and one man who started at 80. So I have 3 children, 3 grandchildren, 2 cats. I love to travel to places that are off the beaten path. I like to connect with nature. I listen to music. I love to cook and have special dinner parties at my home. And I love to teach classes, take classes, and meet interesting people and hang out with my family and the friends that I love.
Thank you. Thank you. I love that. I always want there to be women at least 10 years older than me that I can look at and go, there, that's how you do it. That's how you do it. So yeah. Thank you, Kitty. That's how you do it. That's how you do it. How about you, Belinda? Tell us about yourself.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on with you today, Jenny. I, like these other ladies, have had a lot of different experiences. I've retired from a couple of jobs. I was a flight attendant for 31 years with a major airline. Then I became a teacher, which was going to be my first passion. I taught in middle school, and then I taught as an adjunct. But then when I retired, then I began to really find my passion. And I found that my passion was in things spiritual. I became an ordained minister. I took up yoga. I've been doing that most of my adult life, but became a yoga instructor in 2016. And then I decided, well, there is another passion, something that I'd like to do, and that is be an actress. So I auditioned for my first stage performance, and that led to commercials and other types of things that I do now. And it's, it's like after retirement, you can have a really fun life.
Yeah, and you're not really retired, are you? Linda, how old were you when you went on your first audition?
All right, so I'll just be transparent. I'm 72. So I think I was probably about 56 or 57.
Okay. And even at 56 or 57, there are some who would think, well, why would you bother? Even though.
Oh, let me tell you. I said I wanted to do this. I looked in the paper. Within a week, there was an audition coming up for a play. I made an appointment, got down to the audition, sat in my car, and almost talked myself out of it. Then I said, you gave them your word you'd be here. So that's what I did. I showed up and I got the part.
Yeah.
Yay.
So, you know, there's something
That right there is such a great message. You know, we got to keep showing up, right?
Yes.
And I want women of a certain age to show up and be big and bold, and also show other women how it's done. Women who are our age, who are older than us, and who are way younger than us. And so the reason I wanted, thank you, ladies, and I think anybody watching this knows now why I chose the three of you to be here with me today. The reason I wanted to do this show was a few reasons, but you know, I turned 70 in October. And I think at 40, I thought that 50 would be when I started to feel old. And at 50, I thought that 60 would be when I started to feel old. And at 60, I was sure 70 was going to feel like something else. And of course, it didn't. It didn't. The only thing I would get little glitches about is, well, I obviously have less time in front of me than I do behind me. So what's important to me right now? But the truth is, I never knew how much time I had in front of me anyway, right? So just live life as though you have all of that time in front of you. And so, you know, I'm very blessed to be this age and to be in the condition I'm in and have the work that I do and all of that. So that was why I started this feature in On Purpose Woman magazine called Sage Women, Wisdom Gleaned from 70 plus years on the planet. And Kitty and Rosemary are in the first Sage Women issue, and Belinda will be in our next one. But I really am doing this because I want to shine a light on women that I think may be dismissed by certain portions of the population. I said when I was younger, you know, I think not everyone here is a baby boomer, but I used to say, well, baby boomer women are going to age differently than our mothers and our grandmothers did. But there are also women, Kitty, you're not an official baby boomer, but you are a woman that I would have looked at and gone, oh yeah, that's how you do it. You know, so you don't have to be a baby boomer. I know we think we're the coolest generation ever. You don't have to be a baby boomer to actually, you know yourself and know deeply who you are and what you're about and what you want to be doing out there in the world. And I wanted us to model aging for younger women. And this became really clear. Some of you, I may have said that. I don't know if I said it in the meeting last night or not, but I was attending an event online, and it was a hybrid event with women in person and women online. And it was a bit of a conference kind of thing. And the keynote was a woman who'd won some beauty contests. She was a bit older, I think 40 something. So it was a certain type of beauty contest. And she was lovely, and she was doing some great charitable work out there. But she was talking about the team of people it takes to make her look good. And she was going, and then she goes, because, you know, aging really sucks. And that just, I told my friend that if I'd been there in person, they would have heard my gasp, because it was like, and it just hurt my heart that at 40 something, she's thinking aging sucks. And so I want to shift the conversation around that. And so I think we're going to have more of these conversations, but I want to show people out there what 70, what 80, what 90 really looks like, and to dispel these stereotypes. So let's start talking about attitudes about aging. So when you think about your mother or another female member of your family and how they were being when they were the age you are now, what were they modeling for you? And I'm going to start with you, Kitty.
Well, my mother died when she was 45. I was a teenager. And then my father married again, and my stepmother died when she was 45 on my birthday. And then my father died when I was 45, and one of my best friends died when she was 45. So I kind of dreaded my mid 40s because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And the women that I knew in my family, some of them lived longer, but even when they were 45, they looked and acted like they were 75 or even like 95. And I literally went out and seeked out older women that I wanted to be like. And I would walk up to them and I would say, tell me how you do it. I want to be like you. And it's all about attitude. Most of it is about attitude. And the answer was to keep relevant and to be alive, to live your life more than survive it. And to have all different ages of friends. And
now women are coming up to you and saying, how do you do it? Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I say the same thing to them. It's about keeping relevant, and
Mhm.
and as long as we have a good mind, we can continue. Well, when you think about it, it used to be when people were 60, they retired and they were considered old. And now people are, I'm working into my 80s, and between 60 and 80 is the same amount of time as between birth and graduating from college. That's a long time to be productive and do things and be awesome.
Yeah, it sure is.
Yeah.
Thank you for
And you
that.
don't have to prove anything either, because you've already been there and done that.
That is so true. That is so true. How about you, Belinda? What were the women role models like for you?
I remember being a small child, and I was fortunate enough to have my great grandmother living. And I just thought she was so old. And at that time, she may have been 50-ish, I don't know. But the way women lived back then, they just stayed in a box. You went to church, you may have had a few social organizations, but they pretty much lived in a narrow box, at least in my family. And I always looked outside my family at other women that I thought had interesting lives and knew that that was what I wanted. I'll never forget, though, when I was a flight attendant in my 20s, I was in San Francisco and I was having brunch, and I looked over at a table of women. One of the women was a much older woman, and she had more wrinkles than I've ever seen on anybody, but she had a smile that lit up the room. And I kept staring at her until finally, I think it became obvious. And I said to her, "You're just beautiful." But we wouldn't normally look at somebody with all those wrinkles thinking that.
Mhm.
And I think that was the moment I realized that it was more in attitude than anything else.
Yeah, I agree. Great story. Thank you. How about you, Rosemary?
I look at where I am now and thinking about the times where I was worried about getting older, like turning 25 for me was a little hard. And I'm going back, wow, if only I'd known then what I know now. And I used to think that, oh, 50 is so old, I probably won't make it past 50. And that was 23 years ago. But I look at my mom. My dad was 14 years older than my mom, and he passed away when she was just about 60. And I watched her, and I remember saying to her, Mom, I'm so proud of you. You get up and shower and get dressed every day. And she had gotten a degree. She graduated from college in 44 with a degree in economics and went to work at the Census Bureau and worked for the government. And then later she became a teacher for a long time. And then in her later years, she got into real estate, and then she started teaching real estate. So she pulled all of this history together. So in her 60s, she was teaching real estate, and she was, out there, and she didn't quit when Daddy died, and she didn't give us anything. And when she was in a senior living apartment in her 70s, she was the one that the other people would come to and ask to help them fill out their tax forms or their Census Bureau forms or whatever they had to do. And so it was like she was the wise woman all along. And that model of no matter what, you don't quit, you just keep going with what you got was so important, I think, for me. And, as all four of us are talking about in our 70s, we're all working, but we're doing what we love. And so it's not work. And I think that was the thing that I learned too, is it doesn't have to be like Maynard G. Krebs. We're probably all old enough to remember Dobie Gillis, but that work, it doesn't have to be like that. We're in our joy, we're in our purpose. And I'm going to do this until my last breath. I love what I'm doing. And so why would I want to wake up in the morning and not do this?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that. Belinda, Have you embraced every decade, or were there some that were harder than others that you were dreading? Or, I mean, Kitty obviously didn't want to turn 40 something because she'd had a lot of experience with things happening to people at 45. I know my older sister had dreams for years that she was going to die when she turned 40. And she was really frantic about it. And she, was supposed to be on her 40th birthday. So she relaxed a little bit after that. But have you been Yahoo at every decade, or have there been some that took some more work for
I
you?
was excited about the 20s. I thought I knew it all in the 30s when I was in my 30s. At 40, I really began to live. At 50, I suffered some tragedies, death of my mother, but I also remarried in my 50s. So I went through menopause, which was for me a bit traumatic because I had never been depressed my whole life, and suddenly I was having these fluctuations in my my mood. But with my doctor's help, I worked through that. So 60s, that was good. And now as I enter into the 70s, I am apprehensive because, as you said, there's more behind me than ahead of me. And I know that some things, I wake up some mornings with issues in my joints, and you never know which one's going to show up. So I am still, though, I would say I'm expectant of good.
Yeah. Thank you for that. How about you, Rosemary?
I look at each decade as what was the lesson in it, and it's been so valuable to live this many decades. But I go back to when I turned 30, which in astrology, my first Saturn return, I got a divorce. I found my voice. I mean, when I was leaving my first husband, I got a counselor because he was convinced, my ex-husband was convinced that if I just fixed myself, everything would be fine. And I had one appointment with this therapist who listened to me for an hour. And by the time I got to my second appointment the following week, I had a lease on an apartment and I had a mover coming the next day and I was moving out. And it was like finding my voice. Somebody listened to me. Somebody thought I was valuable enough to listen to. And so I look at that shift that happened in my 30s, and I was working and I was a single mom, and it was all glorious. And then in my 40s, I went to seminary, in esoteric seminary, and they don't like people to go there until they are in their 40s, because that's when you finished your how to be on the planet, how to have a family and a career, and then you can do your spiritual work. And so my 40s were very exciting because I was doing this. I had shifted from my job with the DoD to the job with Hubble and NASA. And I got ordained. I became a Reiki master. I learned NLP and hypnosis. I changed careers. All of that was happening in my 40s. And then the year I turned 51, my mom passed away. I know what that feels like, Belinda. And we moved from Maryland, where I'd been born and raised, to Colorado. And so I had a year where my husband was traveling, my new husband, and my mom died, and I'm in a place that I don't know anybody. And that depression thing hits, and it was kind of like, well, why not just do it all at once? Like, let's do menopause too. And so, it was kind of like, well, I had that 1 year that was tough. And my 50s were really about moving into, who am I authentically going to be on the planet? And so my 60s, I've been 60s and 70s, I'm just adding new things. I studied human design for the last several years, and now I'm doing human design readings, and I'm getting crystal singing bowls to celebrate the 25th anniversary of my ordination. They're arriving on Monday, and I can't wait to add sound healing to what I'm doing. And so there's newness. And my husband and I we have a spiritual exploration group, get to have these great discussions. So it's like, all of this is, each decade has some gem, some jewel that I can put in my crown, an extra jewel for it. So I'm excited to see, if I figure I have enough heartbeats to get my work done, and I have a lot of work to do. So I'll be on the planet for a while.
I love that. I haven't heard that before. I have enough heartbeats to get my work done. I'll take that one. I like that one a
Yeah, I
lot.
did too.
Can I
So,
say something?
yes, go ahead.
One of the things you just said, Rosemary, that I've been thinking a lot about, it's always learn something new in each season of your life, because I'm thinking about what to do next. And I love that singing bowls idea.
And I've been, I wasn't even planning to do it. And in meditation, I got the word that's how to celebrate the 25th anniversary of my ordination, is to add this. And it's been a really exciting process to create this next phase, this next level. And, I can't wait to see what comes after that. I mean, I'll enjoy it when it's here, and I'll do whatever comes next. Yeah, I would highly advise both things. Learn something new and add something to your repertoire. There, and it can be just learn something for your sake, but also when you add something to your repertoire, think of what you're giving back to the planet.
Yeah.
All of us are doing that in our 70s. That's exciting.
Yeah. Thank you both for that. And before I ask Kitty, I just want to say that it sounds like what you were both saying, Belinda and Rosemary, is it's cumulative. To get to where we are now at this stage in our life, it didn't just happen last week. You have to start wherever you are, but start to add those things. Start to get in touch with your purpose, what brings you joy, how you want to show up on the planet, who are you really? And then we could just build on that. And for me, that leads to just a particularly joyful third act, if you will, that I don't know that I could have imagined in my 20s and 30s, because it wasn't going so great and sometimes back there. So Kitty, what about you? What has floated your boat all these decades?
Well, in my 30s and early 40s, everything wasn't terrible in the 40s. I just had some challenges then, but I was doing astrology for people, and I was writing a newspaper column and a magazine column, but my family dismissed all of that. They thought astrology was frivolous. And I had a dinner party for my family, and I still remember, this was so interesting. We were talking about something, I gave an opinion, and my sister-in-law looked at me, she said, "Well, what do you know? You're just a housewife." And I remember sinking in my chair and thinking, oh, I guess I don't know anything. I'm just a housewife. I totally dismissed me being an astrologer and writing columns and all that too. And then about 2 or 3 days later, I went out to California to see a new friend I'd met who knew I was doing an astrology. And she asked if I would take a friend of hers to Carmel, and I could spend the night and then I'd come back and visit her. So I went to Carmel. They had this dinner party. It was a beautiful, beautiful home. Some very important lawyer owned this home. I forget their names now. But at the home, there was a person who had just had an audience with the Queen of England, another person who had just come back from Africa teaching people how to grow plants in arid environments. Another person had spent the day with Kubler-Ross, and me, and we were all talking, and somebody asked me a question about astrology, and I answered it, and everybody stopped to listen. And all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, they're listening to me and I'm just a housewife. And I spent the night, and the next morning I was walking down the beach by myself, and I was asking God or whoever what in the world this is about, because it was such a change from not having a voice to all of a sudden having a huge voice. And the answer came to me in my head that, and very clearly, that my background in music taught me to read an astrological chart like I would read a piece of music. And I could pick up a Mozart song and all the notes, I could pick out the melody line. And so my job with these very important people that I put up on a pedestal, their lives were so complicated, I could help pick out their melody lines and keep them in tune.
Wow.
And then I had a purpose. And then I was off and running after that. My whole life changed after that day.
Wow, that is such a fabulous story.
Isn't
Thank
that
you
a
for
great
sharing
story?
that.
I love that story.
Great story.
Yeah.
And so and you were how old were you then? Around 40?
No, well, I lived in Miami, but I was visiting California then. And
But
it
how
was
old
in
were
my
you
late
at that
30s.
point?
It was either my late 30s or early
Okay.
40s.
Okay. So I
And
know for me, go ahead.
well, it's just it changed my life, and I was validated for the
Yes.
first time. And then
Yes.
when I was 51, I divorced my husband of 30 years. And then that was another shoot. I didn't have anything holding me back after that. And my life began a second life at 51.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I know for me, my early 30s started me on some path where I got the courage to leave a marriage that wasn't working and go and be on my own for the first time ever with a small child. My son was 3.5 when I left his father. And I started noticing around me. And then so I changed careers, massive career change at 40, met my husband, Don, at 40. So that was a whole new experience. But I started noticing a lot of women around me in their mid 30s starting to question. And if you remember the book Simple Abundance by Sarah Von Rothnick, that was so popular back in the day, I still have it. I still pull it out every once in a while. She did a second book that didn't get quite as much attention. It's called Something More. And it was about this whole idea that at some point, we women tend to wake up like out of a stupor in some cases and go, I know there's something more than this. And I was hearing more and more women questioning, is this the path I want to stay on? And often, a divorce may come along with that, or an estrangement from people who no longer, are serving you or support you, or a new career, or trying something brand new, doing something scary. So I guess what I'm saying is you're never too young to start to get those messages. So start listening to them, and you're never too old to get those messages and listen to them, because that's where the juice is. I think paying attention to those things. I mean, Kitty could have had that walk on the beach and just felt really full of herself. Oh, they like me. They really like me. And that was enough at that point. She didn't question it, but she got an answer, which changed her life and put her on a new trajectory. So to those of you who are listening, pay attention to those signs that show up all the time that tell us what's next for us, or tell us little things like, well, who do I need to meet next, or who's going to help me with that, or just pay attention. That's all I can say about that. So let's talk about the gifts that aging has brought you. And you've already mentioned some of them, but at right here today, what do you most love about being the age that you are? And I'll go back to you, Rosemary.
Well, if I were to say, probably the first thing that comes to mind is becoming a medium allowed me to explore the other side. And that was not my goal when I was getting a degree in mathematics. But I also have learned through this work that I've been doing for 30 years that there is life after life. And so I let go of a fear of death. And that has really been, to me, one of the most liberating things that I've embraced, because if you don't fear death, you live fully. Like, this is great, and I'm going to go on. So, and I learned that actually my mom, when she passed away, she said, well, you're doing this work, I'm going to come back and talk to you. And so I've had lots of conversations with her and my dad, but she's a teacher from the other side, and she's able to teach. So I see this I've had so many glimpses of life on the other side from all the people that I've visited with, or that have come to talk to me or talk to their loved ones, that it's like, I know this is a stage in my existence. It's not, this is all there is. I'm not grabbing at anything, and I'm not trying to get something done or accomplished. I really feel relaxed about waking up every day, being who I am, living my purpose. And if it's my last day, fine. And if it's not, fine. And I'm not worried about what happens on the other side of this life. That's a big gift.
That is a huge gift. That's very, very beautifully said. Thank you. I know two words I've been embracing since my 60s are ease and grace. I want to do everything with ease and grace. And that does not mean easy. It does not mean sleeping all day. It just means I want to ease into things. I want things to be easy. I do want things to be easy for me, but I don't mind things that are hard. I don't know if that makes sense or not. It's like Challenges are good. Hard is not. That's not, I don't like hard, but challenges are great. And so Kitty, what do you think about that? What was the original question?
Well, about aging.
What are the gifts that aging has brought you? Yeah.
A lot through my work, the people I've met that have expanded my mind and my awareness and my perception. And one of the things that helped me with astrology was to find out the astrological chart can show who you really are versus who you were programmed to be. And so many of us, including me, live a life of who we're programmed to be. And once we can get a perspective on that and be who we truly are, then life really begins, and it's a lot of fun. So every year I seem to be happy because I have my own attitude. I choose my own thoughts. I choose not to be grumpy and mean and angry at people. I choose to be around friends that give me energy rather than take it away. And it's really delightful, actually. I like my age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I like it.
Yeah. And it is a choice, and
Yeah.
the grumpy old curmudgeon, that's a stereotype.
That's an attitude.
Yes, it really is.
Yeah.
And so we can either be that, or we can be this loving, exciting, sexy, beautiful, brilliant woman, right?
Yes,
And I know what I would choose.
And to keep a sense of humor, that's really important too.
Yeah.
Laughter is really good for us.
Thank you. Yes. How about you, Belinda? What gifts has aging brought you?
Learning to be authentic. I'm learning to just use my voice. You were talking, Kitty, about who you were, being who you really were, and all the wonderful things you did. Well, I had that added layer of being a Black woman. And so there was certainly a lot of false narratives about who I could be.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've aged, I began to shed the layers of that onion, if you will, to discover that I do have purpose,
Mm-hmm.
I do have value, and I have something to say in the world. And as I've gotten older, it's become easier for me to do that. One of the recent things I started doing was writing. I was an English teacher, a teacher of writing, but I wasn't really writing myself. So now I'm releasing that part of me and being willing to tell stories that are sometimes painful stories. But it's I do believe that as I release stuff and let go, then it's helpful to some other woman.
It is. And I really appreciate you going there because it is different. It is different. It has been different. And I think voices like yours, the more you speak up, and what went in my head when you says, I have something to say, and I added, damn it. Yeah, listen to me. And let me just add quickly that Belinda's had a couple of great articles in the magazine. So check those out if you haven't yet. So did somebody want to say something?
Well, I like to comment on what Belinda said about writing. I took a writing course a few months ago, and we had to write from our original voice, which was before we were 10, and then our acquired voice, which was when we were middle school, high school, college, and then our voice now.
Wow.
And write from that point of view. And I was kind of shocked at what I wrote, especially when I thought about myself writing something at 10 years old and the way I saw my family and all. And I think that's a good exercise for all of us to see how far we've grown, what we want to do, what's important to our lives. It's really important. And one of the things I tell my clients is to write a story, write a description of the most amazing heroine you can imagine. If you're going to write a story for about a heroine in a movie, so a movie actress could read this description and know how that heroine thought, what she said to herself, what she fought for, what her superpowers were. And after you're finished with that, use that heroine as your mentor. And when you have to make a decision, what would your imaginary mentor do? And make that decision, you'll always be right.
Oh, I love that. And I really do like the idea of writing from different perspectives of your life. That's an interesting exercise. I'm going to try that one.
Mhm.
I think, yeah, there are three very different people showed up for those three phases of my life. I know that. So thanks for that, Kitty.
If I could add to what
Please.
Kitty was talking about and Belinda with the writing, I just was doing a writing class with Karen Curry Parker, who is a human design teacher, and also she and somebody I know in Colorado Springs have a publishing company. And one of the things that they talked about was writing in your functional voice and then writing in your unctional voice. You know, the unction being the anointed. Like, what are you, when you think of who you're here to bring a message to and what is your anointing and being on the planet. And it was a very interesting thing to think about, because I think, as you were saying, Kitty, we kind of live in this programmed world up to a certain point in our lives. And then we say, wait a minute, is this me or is this mine to do? Is this who I'm here to be? And once we get into that authentic voice, that authentic self, we present information differently to the world.
Right.
And that's one of the benefits, I think, of being, having gray hairs. Like COVID, I stopped coloring my hair. I have some gray. I'm being authentic, right? There's a way that we can gain some credibility by having the years on the planet. So as well as having the wisdom, there we have a voice, we can have an ear out there. There are people who want to hear, and there are people who don't care, who reject the elderly and reject the wisdom that we bring. And that's okay. That's their journey and that's their loss.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And how many of you are still shocked, though, when you hear something like on the news that an elderly person was hit by a car on so-and-so street and the elderly person was 62? And I'm like, wait, because I'm not elderly. Are you all elderly? It just doesn't fit. It doesn't feel, it's not that I'm denying any of it. It just doesn't feel right. It's not a description I think I would ever use for myself. I guess because of how it's been treated over the years, Or I remember I will look back at some old TV shows, like Don and I, during the beginning of COVID, we watched every Waltons that was on the Hallmark Channel, because it was just such a nice, and they did some pretty interesting, they tackled some pretty interesting subjects, actually. But, Grandpa Walton was in his 60s in real life. I think, and even on the show, and he was like a geezer. He was, at least 90 something, right? And so I think this whole idea of aging, I didn't mention my mom. My mom was always very fashionable. She was 37 when I was born, which in 1951 was considered a little bit up there. My dad was 40. My mother loved, my dad did too. They loved their clothes. They had style. And we had a nice life. And yet my mother held back so much. And my dad would just beg her to please go do something, especially when he retired and they moved to the North Carolina coast, and she wouldn't leave the house for a long period of time. Beautiful lake in their backyard, and she would keep the blinds closed because she just didn't want, she was getting older and she didn't need to do anything else. And she finally, I think, took some painting classes and did some things. Yet when I think about that, she was 61. She was 61 years old. And I remember thinking, my goodness, that's 61. Wow, I better get busy because I don't know if I'll live that long, like Rosemary said. So I think our models for aging had a lot to do with at least how we initially approached it, whether we were okay with it or whether we were dreading it. And I too picked out somebody. I used to I would have conversations with God at night when I was a little girl, and I would think, I think you meant to drop me at that house and not this one. Because I believed this whole idea that this big bird came along at the thing and he dropped you in your house. I was about 6 or 7. And this woman who lived across our street was like a second mom. And she had 3 children who had left home, and she was a bit older, but she was brave. She would take the kids on hikes in the woods, in the mountains. And rather than be fearful of snakes, she would point them out to us and tell us how to be around them. She wore rugged clothes. She could dress up and look like $1,000,000, yet she would wear things that would be appropriate in the woods and in the mountains. And she also used the good china. She burned her candles. And I know this really has not having to do with aging, but it has to do with attitude about how you save your stuff for special occasions or for other people to come in and enjoy it.
It has to do with living.
Isn't it really? And I think she lived to be almost 100. And, she was that, and I was so happy I got to see her when she was well into her 90s. I made a trip just to see her, to tell her what she'd meant to me all those many years ago. So I think the models are so important. But if we didn't have any, now we're the model, right? And so we get to model that. So what would you all say to a woman who doesn't matter what age, she could be 40, 50, 30, but she's looking at aging as like a loss? I mean, what would you say that maybe hasn't been said already? And who wants to go first? Raise your hand.
I can't have some.
Well, I'll go first. I
Okay.
think that there's a way that we can support people, especially women in the aging process, by removing some fears about it. And I just had a voice lesson before we got together. My voice coach is turning 75 next year. She was an opera singer in New York. And she was talking about somebody admiring her for having handled. She had a fall. She had to go through PT, all surgery, all this stuff. And she said, you just do it. You don't think about it. And it's, what are you going to do? What else would you do besides just doing it? And I think that that's one of the things that if we help the younger women, like I know somebody in her 30s who's getting Botox because she's so afraid of getting wrinkles. And you kind of want to just say, if you relax and live every day fully and you just do it and you keep moving, that there's nothing that you can't like live through or go through. And that's the wisdom, I think, of having gotten through all this stuff. None of us, I think, have had a life without some stuff to get through, but we didn't let it beat us down or stop us. And I think you're going to get through whatever you're going to get through. And as long as you keep moving and you're living your authentic life, you'll do it.
Thank you for that.
I also think living is like a book. If I were going to read a novel, I wanted my life to be like reading a really good book. So there's a little bit of Indiana Jones in my blood, I think, because I was ziplining through Mexico in my 70s. So it's just and sailing and all that. I mean, I just if you can do things that really make life interesting. What happens to my generation and in the 60s, before the 60s, women didn't really have many older mentors in which to look at, because women were taught to be subservient to their husbands and they were taught to be stay-at-home mom. And in the 60s, some of the women that worked were criticized by the stay-at-home moms because they were leaving and not doing what they were supposed to do. And then some of the stay-at-home moms were criticized by the women at work, thinking that they were being too passive. And so we had to get through all of that, and things were changing, and what are our roles? And if you think about just living to look young, it's so superficial, because it doesn't have to do with the depth of wisdom and like a really good wine or like a really good book that has a mission, and you fall down, you get back up and you reach your goal, and then you set another goal. That's what makes life invigorating and interesting and makes you interesting. So you just don't sit there and just watch TV all day.
Yeah, it makes for a very delicious life. I love that. Thank
Yeah.
you. Belinda.
Yeah, a couple of points. On the news a couple of days ago, there was a woman, 105 years old, who set a world's record in running a few meters. She maybe it was like the length of a football field. And I was thinking to myself, she must be in pain. I mean, how could she do that? So, but what it said for me personally was, get over the little aches and stuff. If at 105, she can get out there and walk and jog, then, there's certainly things that I can do every day and work through any kind of small pains. But also the other thing I wanted to say is I have a 6-year-old granddaughter. And I'm certainly hoping that she will remember me, just as Rosemary was talking about her mother, somebody who was active, constantly doing new things and adding new things to her life. I have been a seeker since I was in my late 20s, and I discovered the S training. out of San Francisco. And I took that training, and that really put me on a path where I realized that there was more. And I knew that I wanted that more. And I watched other women who were, it didn't matter to me what color they were, but if I saw them being graceful, walking through the world as though, with their head up high, that was a message for me. And I pulled from everybody.
Oh, thank you.
May I
Beautifully
mention one
said.
thing?
Sure.
too? We're all lucky because we're physically healthy, which a lot of people aren't. But I learned from my mother, who was bedridden for 2 years before she died, that even not being able to even get out of bed, she could be a mentor to others because of her attitude and her philosophy of life and her interest in life. And my grandmother, who is totally blind, her lessons to me were so wonderful about appreciating your eyesight while you have it. Appreciate it, because someday you might not have it. So all you have are memories. So be sure to remember what the sunsets look like and remember what a smile looks like. And having that kind of wisdom coming from people who aren't really healthy, they're still really important. Those kind of people that can give those kind of messages.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that. Well, our time is about up. So I would like to go through each of you and hear like one final, like your best stuff, words of wisdom to anyone watching about you and your age and who you are being on the planet. I'm going to start with Rosemary.
Well, the thing that I embraced years ago, decades ago, was the model that everyone is doing the best they can with the resources they have at any given time. And it took me a while before I could apply that to myself, because it was easier to apply to others. But it really did change my life to embrace that idea. And it means that I don't have to have everyone in my life. But it kind of takes the pressure and the judgment out of life. And I think when you live a life of non-judgment and you're only looking at, okay, what's mine to do? Who am I here to be? What's my authenticity in the world? What's my purpose? Then you're free to be you. You're not worrying about other people judging you either, because it doesn't matter, and you don't judge. And I think that creating healthy boundaries around that really does shift you into being free to be you.
Very wise. I remember before, when I was in my 30s, I would hear other women say in their 40s, well, when you hit 40, you stop caring about what other people think. And that didn't really happen for me in my 40s. It took longer than that. But then I remember hearing someone say, well, when you hit 60, not only do you not care about whatever people think, you just blow things up because you don't care what other people think. And so I always had that ahead of me, like, okay, I aspire to not caring what other people think, because I was so into that. Not so much I hope they like me. It was like, I hope they approve of me. I hope they approve of what I'm doing. And that's all old childhood stuff too, being a good girl and all of that. So that whole thing of just, yes, you really can get to a point in your life where you don't care what other people think. The thing, as long as I'm living with integrity and with grace, then I'm not harming anyone. Then I can let go of that caring about what other people think. How about you, Belinda? What's your final big words of wisdom?
Don't sweat the small stuff, because it's all small stuff.
Yeah.
So
what seems important today? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, when you put things in perspective. My mother had a saying, the grass is always greener in somebody else's yard. And, when you go over there, then you begin to see the bald spots in their yard and you're satisfied with your own. And I think that being non-judgmental, as Rosemary said, I am learning that, because we just never know what another person's path is like.
Yeah.
You just never know.
And it's really none of our business, is it? I think that's the thing that I've had to get clear on.
And I have to say too, that when you have faith, whether you call it God or source or spirit, whatever you call it, you have to know that it is much bigger than you could ever think or imagine. Because I've had such a good life. And as much, when I was a little girl, as much as I would think about the kind of life I wanted to live, it's been even better than that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. How about you, Kitty?
Well, about the criticism, I think that holds a lot of people back, where people, I don't know, they try to level somebody down to their level, or they're afraid that if somebody's too great, that it's going to make them look less of, and criticism is bad. But one of the things a teacher taught me is that no one has ever erected a statue in honor of a critic. And I think of that ever so often. And then the other thing is, in tarot cards, there's the Queen of Wands. And the story goes, she used to have black hair and wore a black robe and sat on a black throne next to a Black Panther. But as she became more enlightened, she became more golden, and her hair became golden and her throne became golden. But she either left the panther black or left black spots on the leopard, so she could remember from where she had come, because that gave her the empathy to be the Queen of Enterprise. And I like that story, because we all fall down, and sometimes it doesn't matter if you win or lose, but it's how you win and lose in life, I think. Yeah. And then having that attitude and being able to forgive, but not, deliberately get into these petty fights that some people get into, and the gossiping and all of that. You don't have to do that. We can live more true and authentic to our soul and ourselves. And faith is so important, I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I read a great quote once that said, "You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to." And that spoke to me. That's not mine to do either, to even get involved in some of that stuff. So, well, thank you all so much for being here and for imparting your wisdom to our listeners and to me. And I'm glad that you are all my sage women, and look forward to having maybe more of these conversations, because I think they're needed out there. And I want to thank everyone else who's watching for joining us in the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show here live at the On Purpose One magazine and global community Facebook page. If you love this interview and you want to share with your friends, it will be on our YouTube channel in the next 48 hours, or you can just share directly from the magazine page where you're watching it right now. If you go over to the YouTube channel, please hit subscribe and check out all the other, we've got at least 80 plus other interviews there from all different kinds of great women on all kinds of topics. On November the 23rd, I'll be talking with Laura DeFranco about what I do is not who I am. And that's also, I think, another important thing that we get with the aging process is, what I do can go away, but who I am doesn't go with it, right? So, and there are going to be 4 more interviews in December. So thank you again for watching the Real Women, Real Purpose talk show live in the On Purpose Woman magazine and global community Facebook page. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.